Are we starting? Have we started? I
I
guess
think, yeah,
do people come in?
people are still coming in. I think there was a waiting room.
Okay, great. Awesome. Well,
So I see
hi
an empty
everyone.
spot. Hi.
People are in. Okay, great. Wonderful. Okay, so I guess that means that, yeah, here we go. Let's give people a moment to settle. But it's really good to be here. It's really sweet to have some FaceTime after back and forth through audio. It's really, yeah, I feel like we've been spending a lot of time together, but really that's partly
I
because
know.
we've been reading each other's books.
Yeah, and then just sending each other messages about our ideas, but also updates on our day and what we're up to. So
I
I like know a
know.
little bit of what you've been up to over the last few days. But yeah, I feel so excited to be here tonight. I feel it in my body. Like I feel that excitement in my heart, the pitter patter, and knowing that people are entering this space with us as we
Yeah,
speak.
I know. So welcome to everyone who's joining. And thank you to North Atlantic Books, the publisher of both of our books, Returning Home to Our Bodies, Proud Flesh. Thank you for making it possible. Bevan Donahue, Gabby Cesares Lopez, Tim McKee, and the whole team. Um, so should we get started? I'm sure people will sort of arrive in, but I also know that, we've got a lot to get into. So
Yeah. One question, Abigail, about the view. Should we have it on speaker view? Is
yeah,
everyone
let's
seeing
do
all of
that.
these empty
Let's see.
rectangles?
Yeah, I wonder if we can. So
Oh, it's
it's
on
on
speaker.
speaker and view. Okay, great. Awesome. Great. So I can just see you. Okay. Wow. All right. Um, so let's see. Um, Hi. Here we are. It was a little bit of a tech kerfuffle to get into this space. And as much as I'm used to Zoom, there is always this little edge when it's a webinar panel and I can't actually see the people. So I can see a number. I know that you're here, but there's this kind of different feeling to it than when it's even like, the magical little grids, like the Brady Bunch of Zoom. So, but we're human and we're here, and it's going to be a rich and beautiful conversation that I'm really looking forward to. So, to get us started, just to give a little overlay of how we're going to do it, Catherine and I are both going to talk a bit about our books, about each other. We have some questions for each other. We're going to read from our own books. We're going to talk especially about Proud Flesh because it's a brand new book in the world. It came out just at the end of February, so it's in its first months. And if you haven't yet read that book, I'm like tearing up even thinking about how much this book has meant to me. Um, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. It would be good to have some pen and paper nearby. One of the things that we have planned for us is a bit of a guided somatic writing practice. If you don't feel like writing, that's totally fine. You can do the practice just through sort of, an inner monologue landscape, but you might want to be able to write things down. Um, and then we'll close with some questions. So the chat will be open to send questions into North Atlantic Books. But when Catherine and I were talking about, how we hold space, how we hold these virtual spaces, we both agreed that for us and our particular, spicy minds, it's distracting to have questions coming in as we're speaking, because if you see them, it's a little bit like, oh, right, there's the question. It's hard not to lose a train of thought. And for me, I hold spaces on Zoom frequently, at least once or twice a week, at least. And so I really value the magic of Zoom as a sort of this, gathering portal space that allows us to join in, even though we're separated by time zones and by location. Um, and it feels to me like there's a potency that comes when we hold it like we would if we were in person, right? So in a personal space, well, it'd be really sweet. We'd be going around and we'd be looking at each other's faces, and maybe we'd have some, little like I was at a workshop the other day where he called it uncooling exercises rather than icebreakers, but just to sort of like uncool ourselves and unposture ourselves. So we'd be doing that. We can't do that together, although Catherine and I can like shake and, wiggle. But then once we get into the conversation, like there wouldn't be a side conversation happening, which is what that chat can often feel like for me. So that's one of the reasons that we're not having the chat just open during the webinar. I know that for some people's minds, it does feel really congruent and really nourishing. But so that for that reason, we'll make sure that there's lots of time for both text and but for text chat questions towards the end. But in the when we're talking, we're just gonna kind of go with the flow of the conversation. Do you want to add anything on that end before we dive into the flesh of it all, Catherine?
I don't think so. You described that intention beautifully. We're
Okay.
really excited to share this space with you and for all of you to experience the engagement that's happening within yourself as well, right? This is about listening to our bodies. And so, as you are listening to us, you are also actively receiving. And so, we want you to have that space to really be with yourself as you are receiving.
Yeah. Yeah. You say it so beautifully in your intro, where you invite the reader to engage with the material as slowly as they need, with as much space as they need. And that's also what's true here. This is recorded. North Atlantic Books will put it up onto YouTube afterwards. So if you find yourself, not needing, like reaching your limit, reaching your saturation point, you can leave and come back. And a gift of Zoom, something that I actually really love, um, you know, I personally don't think that it's a passive style of listening to be doing something else, to be drawing, doodling, moving, folding laundry, all of these things. What I find is that if I'm engaged in listening to something of real importance and I'm even just say folding the laundry, it's almost like that laundry is now imbued with the material of what was being talked about. So when I go back to get dressed the next morning, it's almost like it's there waiting for me in a different kind of way. Or if I'm crocheting, that's a favorite listening activity for me, or coloring or doing anything. It's like that object now holds some of the energy of what was shared. So feel free to do that as well. The gift of Zoom, and even especially a Zoom like this, where Catherine and I are only seeing each other, is that the space is yours to embody as you need to and wish to, because you can't distract anyone else, right? And there's some freedom there.
Mhm.
So, and uh, and to get us started, to get us really here, I just invite you to feel into it with us that, there's this web of people. I don't even know where everyone's from. In different time zones, Catherine and I are in different time zones, so I don't know if it's morning or evening for you. I don't know where you are. We really don't know anything about each other. Beyond this truth that all of us who are here this evening or this morning, whatever it is for you, felt that devoting an hour of our time or an hour and a half of our time to the idea of unsilencing our bodies, of listening to bodies, of listening to the natural world, that this is something we want to give our precious time and attention to. And there's something so potent about that in a world that feels really fragmented, in a world that has a lot of fear coursing through it, that, we get pulled away from ourselves so constantly. And yet here we are, we managed to find our way here to a space where the focus is on deep presence and deep listening. And we're not alone in that. And that has a magic to it, just to know that you're not alone in craving conversations like this. You're not alone in feeling into the wisdom that the body holds, the wisdom of the body as part of the world as a whole. That there's a lot of us, right? And right now in this moment, there's a lot of us actively in this conversation, listening, engaging, thinking through these ideas. And I don't really have another word for it other than magic. That's magic. So thank you for being here. Thank you for giving your time and attention to a conversation like this, to feeling the pull to a conversation called Unsilenced Bodies. And thank you, Catherine, for being here. I'm excited to get into it.
Thank you for being here, Abigail. And
Yeah.
also, I'm really excited also and just settling in, figuring out what else I need to do to get myself settled and comfortable. And you might take a moment to think about that too, or if there's anything you wanna grab now, like Abigail was offering to hold in your hands. I've got my my sacred petrified wood by me that I love to touch during these conversations.
That's beautiful. I know I'm looking around my take a little elephant figurine, I'll hold it. Yeah. I do invite you to move into your comfort and to question what that means. What does it mean to move into comfort? So it doesn't mean sit in any particular way or do any particular thing. And it is, in fact, just asking the body, what do you need to be more comfortable? Is a profound shift from the mode of thinking that we've been cultured into, which is mind tells body what to do. So sit up straight, act like this, be quiet, all these different things, right? That we've been taught to do as a way of essentially silencing the body so that the mind can guide the show. When we ask ourselves, what do I need to be more comfortable? Do I need to loosen any clothing or change the position of my legs or move to the floor or roll around or move my head and neck or any of these things? When we ask the body, what do you need to be more comfortable? And we move towards comfort, whatever that is, we're shifting right then. We're making a potent shift into body as consult, body as home, body as ally, body as self, rather than mind that dictates, right? So move into your comfort for this conversation, and that comfort can change. You might find yourself needing something different than you did before. So moving into your comfort, I'm going to share a little bit about my experience of finding Catherine Simone Gray's work and book, and that'll start our conversation. Um, so, as I mentioned, both of our books, my book, Returning Home to Our Bodies, and Catherine's book, Proud Flesh, are published by North Atlantic Books. And so when Catherine's book was in its manuscript stage, I was sent the manuscript and asked if I would read it to consider putting a little blurb out to say what I thought. And I will say that as soon as I opened up the manuscript, I was just taken. I just was there was something magnetic about the way that Catherine writes, the unapologetic depth that she writes with, and the topic itself. And so it was the easiest yes to say that I would write a little something saying that I think people should read this book. And then I asked that I be sent an advanced reading copy so I could actually hold it in my hands because I knew that it was going to be a book I was going to need to devour. And that's exactly what happened. Once I have it here, my beloved copy, that quite literally, once I had it in my hands, I really didn't put it down for very long once I had it. The depth and richness and brutal beauty that you write with, Catherine, is really profound. Um, and so then when we were talking about, just helping this book come out into the world, it's a really special time for a book. And I remember it so my own book came out not that long ago, so I'm fresh into that feeling of just, oh, it was private and personal and now it's out in the world. And so we were talking about how I could support you in that. And at first we were going to do an Instagram live. And then, things really like came to a front about how weird those platforms are. I'm still on them. I don't plan to leave them. And I was just like, this doesn't feel like the conversation I want to have there. I don't want to give it to them. I want this to be ours in a different kind of way. So over the over a few conversations, over months of conversations at this point, this is what has come about. And Catherine mentioned that we've been kind of at the beginning that we've been passing voice memos back and forth. So it's like, walking my dog or she's in her backyard and we're just kind of sharing what our thoughts are about these ideas. And that's where we're coming to this from, is from this sort of organic and rich space. And for me personally, also just this sort of awe of what kind of a writer you are and the story that you have offered. So I've got I'm really excited to dive into what we're going to be asking. But before we get into that, do you want to share some, Catherine?
Sure. Thank you, Abigail. As I was listening, I was just feeling emotional hearing you describe your experience because as you said, writing a book is in so many ways a private experience. And for this one, it felt like a very quick turnaround for when it was then being shared, the manuscript, and which is the path I chose. But yeah, it was so meaningful to make that connection with you. I actually didn't know that my manuscript had been sent to you, even though you were kind of on my wish list, or definitely at the top of my wish list for North Atlantic books. Because right when even though I had not yet read your book and I got it soon after, we probably were starting to read each other's books at the same time, which is what we talked about. We talked about the power of books to connect us over these time zones and lands as well. So Abigail's book, Returning Home to Our Bodies, when I was looking through the North Atlantic Books catalog and so honored to be in the company of so many healing authors, visionary authors, Abigail's really stood out to me because it felt truly like a kindred spirit to my book. And my book is so personal to me, so I felt a kindred spirit with you of the the scientific elements of the body and the natural world weaving into the poetic voice of the body and the natural world as well. And so it was a clear connection even before I opened your book. And then I remember being on the beach with my family when I received by total surprise your blurb, your response to my book, and I immediately started crying because it moved me so deeply. And I don't think I've ever shared that with you or I've shared it yet. But Abigail's book takes us on a beautiful substantive, dreamy, visionary journey into our bodies, into ourselves, but then also looking all around us outside ourselves with some really cool details about the body and the natural world that were new to me. Um, a lot of it was new to me, or the way that Abigail described it, introduced it to me. Sometimes, if it's just 2 degrees different from the language we've heard or how we've thought of it, it can have foundational shifts in what we're seeing and what we're sensing and what we're experiencing. And that was my experience with Abigail's book. That um, well, to give a brief story there, when I was approaching my book launch, I started to have a recurrence of this heart issue that had previously been dormant for about 8 years. And it's an electrical issue of the heart. And so I'd at that point read your book, I'd taken in your book, and yet I was also starting to go to these cardiology appointments again, which I hadn't done in about 8 years. And um, I was just hanging on to my doctor's every word as he was, describing what was happening medically, saying like the right side of your heart pumps slower. It's behind the left side of your heart, and just explaining to me in layperson's terms what was happening. And right away when I came home and I was just processing this, I wanted to open up your book to remember what you had written about the heart and to be with your voice alongside my doctor's voice and alongside my own experiences with the sensations. And so I hope if you haven't checked out Abigail's book, Returning Home to Our Bodies, that you welcome it into your home and your collection as well, because it's really a resource that can be there for you when you need it, as well as such a delight to move through and
Mm.
begin to learn new things.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel honored. Do you want to share? I would love if you would share a bit about the story of your book and the story behind the title, Proud Flesh, and just get, especially since it's so new, maybe some people have devoured it like I have, but maybe people are new to it. So will you share a bit about what that story is?
Sure, absolutely. I have it here in my hands, Proud Flesh. It's a memoir of motherhood, intimate violence, and reclaiming pleasure. And so, just to share briefly, my book shares how new motherhood, particularly the intimate physicality and rigors of new motherhood, which for me involved pregnancy, birthing in two different ways for two different births, cesarean birth and a vaginal birth, breastfeeding, how, and then caregiving for very, very closely skin to skin with infants, toddlers, how that time of life of new motherhood stirred up memories in my body from an abusive relationship that had ended in my college years and had lasted 4.5 years, starting when I was in high school. And the story is told in two arcs in alternating chapters. One of the arcs is this intense postpartum healing journey after my second birth, which was my first vaginal birth. And I had a second-degree tear with some healing complications and scarring issues called overhealing, my body's response to the wound. And this very private wound in my vagina, in my vulva area, becomes a window into exploring my own history of violence in my body, with my body, but also probing the public epidemic of violence against women as well. And so one of the arcs is that postpartum healing journey, staying very close to my body in that time. And then the other arc is following me in my young womanhood, starting when I was 16 years old and entering this abusive relationship, my first romantic relationship, really serious romantic relationship, and then coming out the other side as well. And so in those young womanhood chapters, nature becomes a lens, asking new generative questions about my past and coming into new understanding about what my needs were, what my desires were, what I was seeking in those spaces. And so each of those chapters from my young womanhood is named after some feature of the natural world, mostly here in Mississippi, though there are a couple that are other places as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Thank you. Yeah, it truly is. Um, it's such a deep story. It's such a rich story. I wrote this in one of the um, posts that I made about this event, but as a woman who has not had children, loves children, but won't have children, it was one of the first stories of motherhood that I found that somehow made space for my experience, even though I'm not a mother. Was this really, I don't even really have the words to explain how you did it, but there was this spaciousness for me to be there and not feel like it was like I was just, sort of on the sidelines watching. I think it was maybe just the visceral quality of the way that you write, as well as then following your healing and finding it make it like finding it sort of tr like rehydrating ways of healing in my own life from in various different ways, both partner violence and otherwise, that there was just this space that you created through the length of the book that was really meaningful. And I know I'm not alone in it because I was in Mexico where I have family there, and I passed it to a friend who was visiting. She inhaled the book, and then I was like, okay, but I need it back. Like I can't, you can't take it with you. And then she gave it to her friend who was going to give it back to me. And she texted me. She's like, I'm sorry, I'll make sure I get it to you, but I have to read it now. And I was just like, okay, I get it. I do get it, but you have to give it back to me. So yeah, there was just something, I love that you invite people to take their time with it at the beginning, and then and I'm sure some people do and want to savor it. But for me, it was just like this, like plunging into necessary water. So one of the things I wanted to bring forward from Proud Flesh, in part one, in Bladder Diary, you're talking about well, maybe actually, I'm going to ask you if you don't mind. I'll let you take your drink of water. But would you read that section from Bladder Diary where you're talking with your doctor about what has been discovered? Do you mind?
Sure, sure. I would love to. Let me see. Let me find where I'm going to begin. I'll I'll back up just a little bit from that excerpt. And so to give you a little context, I'm about 4 months postpartum at this point from my second childbirth, and I'm going to see a pelvic floor physical therapist for the first time to work through and understand and try to heal from some mysterious and lingering symptoms such as urinary incontinence and weird sensations that I've been trying to describe to my husband over months, like always finding new words for it. Like, I feel like there's like a hard-boiled egg like at the top of my vagina. Like, what is this weird wobbly feeling? Things that I could only explain in those odd words. So, here we go. This is from part one, Bladder Diary. Veronica, a petite black woman, retrieves me from the waiting room and walks me down a hallway that becomes darker and uninhabited. We pass through a door that says pelvic health. Veronica and I sit down in front of a desktop and she starts asking me questions. How many seconds do you usually pee? What's the highest your pain level has been in the past week? Over the past 4 weeks, how often did you feel sexual desire or interest? I'm noticing you're saying I don't know a lot, Veronica says. Do you think you have loss of sensation? Beneath my I don't know is a precision of narration I'm seeking, as if I'm having a hard time finding the right word. Above my I don't know is the microscopic lens we are now focusing on sensations that have been colossal swaths of texture under my untrained naked eye. We move through the questions slowly, in a way that feels endless, and although the answers aren't easy to find, I feel myself exhaling, hopeful that answers will come. Not once does she look at me as if I'm an unreliable narrator. Not once does she look at me as if my I don't know is weakness. I undress, and she pulls on her gloves. She hands me a plastic model of a pelvis so I can understand where she's touching me, as if I'm holding the round rim of myself and peering in. This brings comfort. She inserts 2 fingers into my vagina. Does this hurt? She asks. She lightly presses down with her fingers, testing layers of muscle, ligament, and bone. She presses on different points along my inner edges, asking again and again, does this hurt? I respond with, no, or that feels tender. Occasionally, yes, it does hurt. Her eyes are kind, receptive. This is different from my encounters with the speculum. Finger flesh maps the inside of me, sensate and human. No plastic, no metal. Even as it's happening, relief settles as her hand moves methodically with a cartographer's coordinates. My synapses are connecting, and I can sense the depth and width of my inner corridor. Like when my baby found his toes for the first time and realized they were his own body. I'm not left alone with this body and these questions, and I'm not asking Lloyd for answers he doesn't have. Veronica hands me a big mirror. Now bulge lightly like you're having a BM. See that thing coming down on my finger? That's your bladder. You have stage 2 bladder prolapse. I am looking at my bladder, and it is sinking into my vagina, an orb dipping like a harvest moon. She gives me a glove and tells me to put my own finger inside and bulge again. I watch as I bulge my bladder against my own finger. Veronica explains that pelvic muscles can become so stressed and weakened in pregnancy and childbirth that they can no longer support your organs. That hard-boiled egg feeling wobbling at the top of my vagina, it now has a name, cystocele. So often, my body exists beyond language, and to learn this word feels like making narrative sense of my flesh. To connect a sensation with a medical reality is sane-making and creates coherence between my own knowing and objective truth. I don't want what I'm feeling to have to be legitimized by professionals in order for me to trust it. But when you've survived gaslighting and abuse, it's hard to have full confidence in your perception. But Veronica is next to me, saying, "You can trust your body's information. I believe you. I see it too."
Hmm. Thank you. Thanks for bringing it back. I'm so glad that you included all of that context for it. When I was reading that part, it's dog-eared and underlined and, tear-stained. There was something that was so um, it stood out to me, this description of being witnessed in your body in a clinical setting that felt like such a stark perspective shift from the body as object, even though you're saying that it was so helpful to have your body described to you, to have this language given to you, to have somebody say, this is what's happening. Um, and I was thinking about how after abuse, feeling like we can't believe our bodies can have us reaching for external validation. And I think that that exists on the full spectrum of abuse. And I feel like within a violent culture, there's just that all of us live on that spectrum. So there's this reaching for external validation that still maintains a sense of body as object. Like, do I look all right? Am I behaving all right? Am I all right? Right? Am I okay? Am I safe because I'm performing okayness? But in this passage, you speak of being witnessed in your body as not only validation, but also this empowering sort of rehabiting. And so, can you share more about that experience of learning the body through this clinical way that was of returning to yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I love that question. So, after I gave some context about that passage, after this vaginal birth, there was a total incoherence that I felt of this part of my body, like a total re lack of recognition when my hands like met my vulva to wash it, for instance. And, it was a repair from a second-degree tear in childbirth, which is it essentially, for me and for many others, it's a kind of genital reconstruction. And there are changes in the appearance and the changes in the sensations as well as the new tissue, the scar tissue is forming. Um, and scar tissue starts out really rigid there. So there, yes, as I said, like this lack of coherence that was totally disorienting and very destabilizing in a way that I didn't really see talked about or reflected in the culture of motherhood around me either. We talk about changes after birth, like stretch marks and um, weight changes and changes in the shapes of our breasts, things like that. All of those are realities as well. But what I was feeling was this isn't about not accepting the aesthetics of my body. Like I feel like where am I? I am in totally unfamiliar land in this body, and that felt really scary. So I mentioned that I'd been describing these sensations to my partner, to my husband, in earlier in part one. And prior to going to pelvic PT, he was really the one I was working with for these questions of I would look at myself with a mirror and try to figure out like what was there before? What's changed? What did it look like? And how do I understand what like I wanted to understand what had changed. But I was putting a lot of pressure on him for that. He couldn't really tell. It was hard for me to tell too. Neither of us had really spent enough time literally witnessing, visualizing that part of my body, that intimate part of my body, in order to be able to recognize it in a way that felt coherent now of understanding the changes. So when I went to pelvic PT in the passage I described, Veronica, my physical therapist, she really walked me through my body in a way that helped me understand the structures of my pelvis and my organ and the muscles there. And she helped me, as I said, or as I read, match sensations with clinical reality. And I could observe with my eyes and I could touch with my hands. And she invited me to be a part of that process. She wasn't just looking and telling me what she saw, what she found. She asked me to look as well. She asked me to touch as well. And that created um, a comfort, a relief, and a much deeper understanding than I could have than without being asked to engage in that way. And she really slowed down enough for me to take it in, to come into, for me to, she wasn't just diagnosing me, she was holding space for me to come into relationship with these changes in my body and understanding of my own body. And, these sessions could last 2 to 3 hours with a whole arc to them of conversation and physical therapy, activating practice, learning how to activate different muscles, different muscle groups, and the witnessing and the hands-on healing as well from her. So I was witnessed. Witnessing was a big part of that, but I was also invited to witness myself in the process. And I was resourced. I was gaining resources, information that helped me understand my body. And I was guided through it while that space was tenderly held for me. And trust was built between us. And so, if we're thinking about what you said about the body coming into relationship, shifting from this body as object to the body as home, I think a lot of that, and you write about this too, is about coming into intimacy with the body. Well, what does that mean? It, when I think about just intimacy in general, knowing and being known, reaching
Mhm.
toward understanding, um, working through vulnerable spaces, inviting and allowing yourself to be invited closer, even
Mhm.
toward things that feel a little uncomfortable, but to trust that there is there is healing available there and moving closer.
Mhm. Yeah, I love how that is such a there's so much of a map for what healing is not necessarily just the healing of a vaginal tear after childbirth, but healing in so many different forms that it requires trust and slowness, you know, hours of time in our modern sort of like insurance-driven world feels just almost impossible to imagine. Um, and yet, like, of course, it takes that long to unwind and soften into what is being done. But then I really love what you're talking about, that it wasn't just how you're describing that it wasn't just a diagnosis, like, well, this is what's happening, but also, and how you describe in that scene that she explained what was happening and then invited you to touch it, to feel it. So it's not just something that is happening to you, or even something that, maybe you saw with a mirror or with a camera, but something that you were actually invited to touch, that there was so much physicality to it, and how important it is to be witnessed by that sort of clarity of that part of the magic of healing is in being witnessed by someone who knows, right? Who has seen it before. Because like you were saying, you and your husband, for all the intimacy that you'd had with that part of your body, it still wasn't that clinical understanding that comes when you really devote study to something. And so we're talking about a vaginal tear, but there's so many different, this is allegorical. There's so many different things, right? To healing from traumas of all kinds, physical, emotional, developmental. So to be able to be witnessed in a way of someone who understands and knows the pattern, who understands health versus moving away from health, who understands the physiology behind what we're looking at, right? But then not just to have it be clinically sort of placed upon a person like this is, and now also not identified like, well, now you are a prolapse bladder, right? It's that this is something that is happening to you and that will change over time. That sort of spaciousness, I think, gets skipped over in some of the other things that we're trying to navigate through healing, right? That there's this tendency to identify with the trauma or with the diagnosis that limits the nature of healing as a changing, malleable, responsive, adaptive process. So I think that's part of what makes this book give so much space beyond just the space of talking about healing these two arcs that you're talking about, but that there's just this space for healing that is described through, guiding how this sort of slow trust, intimacy of being known and knowing is such a beautiful way to describe what intimacy is. That speaks to what the magic of healing really requires. So
Mm.
and you go on in that section to quote your friend Lindsay's description of emotional abuse. You said it feels like someone or you said, quoting her, it feels like someone closes the stage curtains and rearranges the furniture and then opens them again. You go on to say, motherhood has literally rearranged my organs, repositioned my sensations, and altered the construction of my tissues. I find myself looking back to the last place I recognize myself, and I'm reminded of how I looked back after I escaped the abuse, as if I followed a breadcrumb trail asking, what the hell happened? Where did I go? Where was the last place I saw myself? And that had me, as I was thinking about, our time together tonight, I was thinking about this process of rediscovering ourselves and how it can feel really daunting. Like the work is never over. There's just always, it's always going to be there, sort of looming over us, or it can feel invigorating, like sort of like, rearranging the furniture and getting that sort of burst of creativity that comes with that. Um, but I think for me, and maybe for you, and maybe for people listening in, I think it's often more not only a mix of both invigorating and daunting, but almost more like a wave that dips back and forth between the two. And I think that that's, since we're speaking about healing as a result of childbirth, I think it's worth naming that part of that is the hormonal cycle that those of us who menstruate are swimming through, and that's an undercurrent, like a foundational aspect of the life of all of us, really, because all of us are in relationship with people who menstruate that doesn't get talked about a lot. right? Outside of certain circles. And I think there's a lot of value to talking about it more, like how these ebbs and flows bring certain things up to the surface and then, other things come up to the surface, etc. But I think that because we're all in relationship with people who are menstruating, it's not just something that is affecting, it's not just, for some people, not others. I think that this is an experience, and we all come from people who menstruated. That's just the nature of birth and physiology. So I think this riding the waves of healing and re-knowing ourselves as this sort of continual growth cycle, almost like seasons come, day follows night, spring follows winter. That feels so much more accurate than the linear goal-oriented model of healing, which says that there's a beginning point and there's an end point, which is baked into the system, the medical system of healing, right? Where it's like especially if we're navigating insurance companies, they have a set point where they're like, well, you've reached this marker, so you're good to go, right? And the marker being often something like body as object again, either depending on the injury, body as object that can go back to work, body as object that can return to sex, body as object that can perform these tasks, right? Rather than seeing this undulating process of rediscovery. So I'm wondering for you to ask a question of you, how do you hold yourself through these waves of sort of the unfurling process of healing? What helps? What do you do?
Hmm. Well, first, your question itself holds a lot of wisdom in in the way that it's asked. How do you hold yourself through these waves? First, by knowing, as you said, that there will be waves, which you went through that process of describing it. And yet when you're going, even though we can know these things, like, yes, there will be waves. Every day is not a happy day. Every day I'm not invigorated by healing. Every day this is not a this doesn't feel generative every day. Sometimes I've got, medical bills going to collections because I don't want to like open my mail and I'm like that's like too much to look at or whatever it is. Like there's the heavy, real grit heaviness to it. But it starts how I hold myself through these waves. It has started by first knowing that there will be waves. And even that knowing has come in waves where I think like, oh yes, I've accepted this now that there will be waves. But then one really slams me and I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't think the waves would still be like this. But there will be waves. That's the first. That doesn't mean I'm doing anything wrong or regressing. I'm a fluid body. I'm a fluid human. I am part ocean. The ocean is not static, it's dynamic, and I am too. And there will be waves. That is the reality we're working with. And even working with that, as I said, that is its own wave of acceptance and surrender and learning to be with that reality. But then the second orientation is in there in your question as well. I will hold myself through the wave.
Mm.
So there will be waves, and I will hold myself through the waves. That's a promise to myself. And that's also something I can't take for granted and not something that is just told to you and then you get it and then you've got it. It's not a switch that's flipped. That is a practice, a commitment,
Mm.
a devotion to trusting, first declaring, and then trusting that I will hold myself through the waves. And the only way that trust can really be built, I've found, is by experimenting with what that's like and not getting it right every time. Sometimes I think I'm holding myself through the waves, but then I feel myself getting sicker or less less well. And I'm kind of back to the drawing board of, okay, that's not what I needed this time. So how else do I hold myself? But coming back to that promise and that commitment over and over, that to your body, to your soul, to yourself, your whole self, that when the wave comes, I will be there with you. I've got you. I'm going to hold you
Mhm.
through these waves. I'm not leaving you. I'm not turning my back on you. I'm not choosing any agenda over holding you, no one else's feelings, even my own designs. This even actually came up for me approaching my book launch. And in the months leading up to that, I found my body was really asking for me to commit to and to honor through rhythms of life and various sicknesses that came up that I had to kind of pause. I had to pause and reschedule some things, but I could feel my body asking me over and over, like, will you stay with me as
Mm.
this moment of success is happening? Or will you give the dream, will you give this point of success, this achievement, will you let that be more important than taking care of yourself, taking care of me? My body was asking. And I needed to show myself over and over that I would, I would be um, with myself
Mm.
first. And a lot of what that's just looked like in this particular case is understanding that I work very cyclically as well. I am a menstruating person, and I do have times when I really have to push, or it feels like a lift, feels like a little more effort than I would like to give sometimes with ease, even though I want to give it. But then building in rest with that. Following up behind it, knowing that I will need space after this to just be with myself and with my body and to integrate whatever has happened. So there will be waves. I will hold myself through the waves. Sometimes when the wave comes on, I need someone else to hold me too.
Mhm.
And so it's a commitment to practice asking for that as well, which can be really hard for those of us who have done a lot of surviving on our own, taking care of our own feelings as we've often prioritized other people's feelings and tended to them. But just briefly, what does it look like when I'm holding myself? There are a lot of different things that I do when I'm holding myself, just to give some ideas. I'm sure there's so much wisdom out there in the group too, and with you, Abigail, but some of it is just baseline care, back to basics of sleep and
Mhm.
nourishment and food and water and tea, not much caffeine because my heart will get jolty, and that makes me feel anxious. Music and movement are big ones, dancing and shaking and singing through the waves, walking and looking for messages in nature all around me, which means being with myself as I am also witnessing outside myself and looking with curiosity. And knowing that however you feel that day, there's probably a plant somewhere around you to match to match that energy. Just today I was sitting outside in the backyard thinking about this and looking at all the leaf litter, the dried leaf litter there still from fall and winter on the ground, and thinking like, yeah, sometimes you feel like the leaf litter while, the spring flowers are blooming all around you, and just like get into those leaves, put your hands in them, squish them, feel them, be with the leaves as you're being with yourselves. See yourself in them, see what they might have to teach you. Uh, the resurrection fern is also one of my favorite teachers there. Are you familiar with the resurrection fern?
Not the resurrection fern in particular, but I have a giant fern tattoo on my back because ferns are also one of my big teachers. So,
Oh, wow. Well, I don't know if this is particular to the South, but It's a beautiful teacher. The resurrection fern grows on oak trees, on the boughs of oak trees. And it can, when there's a period of drought or just not much rain for a while, it will shrivel up, look totally brown, totally
Mm.
dead. And yet it can survive for 100 years like this.
Wow.
And as soon as rain comes or the humidity of the air returns, it will unfurl into this beautiful, lush green. And yeah, that one never ceases to amaze me and bring trust that the green will come again.
Mm, that's beautiful. It's beautiful. I don't know exactly what type of fern it was that I saw. The type of fern I have on my back is oh, now that I'm asking myself to remember, I'm not going to remember, but so I'll leave it. Um, but when I was in Hawaii years ago and saw a fern on the side of the road. I was hitchhiking, and because it's the tropics, there was new baby like there was unfurling like the fiddlehead unfurling ferns. There was the lush unfurled fern, and there was the, dead and drying out fern. And there was just something about seeing all the stages of life in its singular moment that really spoke to me about just like the nature of being alive, just those waves upon waves upon waves, that there's always something, right? There's not even the waves aren't following a linear pattern. So that was so beautiful. I feel like we could go into hours of conversation just about how you responded to that question. But I wanted to go to a part of your story where you're referring to the practice really of returning to your body um, after a relationship that's been severed with abuse, and you're specifically remembering a memory with you and your now husband Lloyd with the snowflakes. Will you read that passage for us?
Yes, I would love to. So I'll give just a little background information here too. As you might suspect, we don't get a lot of snowflakes in Mississippi. This this is happening in Mississippi, this story. And so when I encounter something new in nature around me, um, I take particular notice. If even if it's like just the other day, I saw a dandelion like weed that was in a yard, and I knew it wasn't a dandelion because it was very tall and spindly, and I can't remember the name right now, even though I looked into it right then. But when I see something new, I take notice um, and see what it might have to teach me. So the snowflakes became this perfect framing for this chapter in which we had this huge snowstorm, like a record-breaking snowstorm in Mississippi. And I was also looking toward rebuilding my life in kind of surprising ways after escaping the abusive relationship. And in this chapter, Lloyd and I are living on our college campus and decide to build a snow dragon. So that's where we begin. The snow was beginning to melt through my gloves and burn my fingers as we built the dragon. But it didn't keep Lloyd and me from singing about making little bird houses in our souls. Even the burning wetness of my fingers felt like a spark, a call to shine. Before I reached down to scoop a ball for the dragon's tail, I turned the ring on my finger so the yellow sapphire wouldn't pinch my skin under my glove. Emerald cut, flanked by baguette diamonds in my grandmother's platinum setting. Lloyd had talked with my father, obtained my grandma's ring from the family safe, took it to the jeweler, and picked out a new gem. He had proposed before the new year, reading me an original poem called Prisms. in front of 100 high schoolers at winter solstice camp. When he got down on one knee, the room became a decadent soar of pubescent screams. It was easy to say yes. Only a few months into dating, when I had first visited his childhood home, we cuddled on the couch, and I told him, I want to talk to you for the rest of my life. What this also meant, I can grow with you and know my own heart, mind, body, and soul. I can feel close to you and know yours. I wasn't reading any books on healing from abuse, but I don't think any of them would have recommended swiftly falling in love and forging a lifelong union all within a year. Loving self first and taking the time to solidly know what you want before considering someone else's needs, especially lovers and new partners. That's what I imagined the books would say. But my inner guidance didn't push these suggestions. Maybe I did love myself already. Loving myself had given me the strength to leave. Loving myself was also a reason I stayed. I loved myself into staying alive in the relationship for as long as I could before I knew that leaving was the next best way to stay alive. I knew how it felt to lose myself incrementally in smears and blurs, and now I knew how it felt to be moving closer to myself, every word, every choice. No felt like a heavy scuffle of hesitation, hiding, smallness, secrets, eyes cast down. And yes was becoming defined in opposition, soft center pulse of motion, dancing, expansive, truth spoken, eyes raised and ready. I remembered who I was at 14 years old when I refused to get confirmed in the Catholic Church because I had doubts and questions. This will make Nana so sad, my father said. But I wouldn't budge once I knew. I can't confirm what I don't believe, I declared. I loved myself in that moment too. It was with that same conviction that I knew that Lloyd and I could have a good life together, deeply good, and that I wanted it, believed in it, and believed in our courage to do the hard work of creating something new. As snowflakes fall, different zones of temperature and slight changes of air moisture create layered patterns of water vapor as it freezes. Tossed by the wind, each snowflake experiences its own sequence and its unique history, imprints in its form. Moments it has passed through become crystallized and flash frozen, unreturnable, singular instants. It's why no two snowflakes are identical. We live like this. We heal like this too. On a different healing vector, I could have been led to a year abroad, teaching English in France and learning who I was abroad on my own. But I wasn't. That wasn't the life that animated me, even though I browsed those web pages. Healing was whatever felt right to return to life, to feel hope, to breathe in the cold morning air, no matter what had been done to my body in nights before. I was here in Jackson, hands making dragon body and dragon tail. Lloyd stacked in smooth snow alongside me. We returned to the shoulders and added a thick neck that rose a couple feet above our heads. We gathered sticks for fangs and claws. We picked up fallen sweeps of pine brooms to segment the tail. Here in Mississippi, my home, I held a piece of ice against my lips and opened my mouth to taste. The dragon mouth opened up to the white sky.
Hmm, thank you. So it was what this was one of the moments when I felt a real kinship with our books. Um, and we've talked about this in our back and forths getting ready for this evening. In chapter 9, the topography of feeling and returning home to our bodies, I'm sharing a way of going into past memories to find the living sensation of different emotions, specifically in that chapter, talking about how we might find feelings of safety and belonging and um, love. And so this is what's going to lead us into a short, perhaps writing practice or at least contemplation practice. So if you haven't yet gotten some writing tools and you want to, this would be a good time to grab it. But I'm going to read a brief section of that chapter and then we'll go into a very brief, we're going to, 7 is the magic number. 7 minutes is the magic number. So we're just going to give a few minutes to writing after we explain what we're going to do. But if you want to go grab something to write with, this is the time. But this comes from chapter 9 in Returning Home to Our Bodies, the topography of feeling. We can imagine ourselves as more fluid than solid, our movements rippling out through the expanse of these soft, fleshy bodies. We can imagine ourselves as an ecotone embodied, a place of resonant tension and full spectrum saturation. We can feel this. At this point in this book, perhaps you already have. When we practice feeling what we have been told is impossible to feel, the subtlety of permeable cells, or the fluidity of the center of our bones, or the undulating movements of muscles and organs, we live into the magic we were taught doesn't exist. A culture of domination requires an inanimate world full of resources to be used for industry and transactional relationships based on what we can get from one another. Feeling into the rich inner worlds of the body and imbuing them with tone and resonance is part of reweaving ourselves into a vibrant living world rooted in reciprocity and mutual care. Culture is a communal act. We cannot live into a healing future if we just sit gazing at our navels, absorbed into our own individual experience. We have to do this together, and that requires a willingness to dive into the messiness inherent in meaningful relationships. We cannot grow into the future we long for just through analyzing the issues and thinking about them in theory. Observation as a purely mental exercise won't get us anywhere we haven't been before. We have to feel what we feel as we feel it, down to the most subtle layers. We have to be in a practice of active inquiry, which is to say, a practice of relationship, a practice of alert wonder at all that is changing as it changes. Part of this is imagination. Returning to the idea from Walida and Marisha and Adrienne Marie Brown that I included in chapter 4, we are playing in the field of science fiction when we try to imagine a world that has lived through the other side of climate chaos, systemic racist violence, and domination-based power structures. This can feel daunting. It is daunting, but we are incredibly adept at embodied imagination. We just might need to remember how. We can access the ways we readily embody imagination by exploring movement as an emotional experience. Our movement changes depending on how we feel, and we can, to some degree, change how we feel depending on how we move. Our emotions change our movement in ways others can perceive and understand, however imperfectly or unconsciously. It's why we call it body language. When I work with children, I teach this by asking them to think about their absolute favorite food, the yummiest they can imagine, while they walk around the room. The lightness of joy in the room is immediate. Hands go to tummies, lips are lipped with incredible vigor, and soon everyone is stomping around the room with purpose in a happy march toward what they want, often with a few swirling twirls on their tiptoes for good measure. If I then ask them to think about something that makes them angry, faces change to grimaces, fists are clenched, and the room gets heavier as feet are pounded into the floor. And if I ask them to think about something that makes them sad, the movement will often stop altogether, shoulders slumping, faces downcast, feet shuffling across the floor. They are moving at all. Adults are sometimes harder to convince to embody their emotions so completely, but young children are experts at it. Observing how our emotions change our movement is one way we return to a conversation with these thinking, feeling, sensing bodies so that we might be guided by all the rich wisdom we inherently contain. Most of us are taught at a young age to control the ways our bodies express emotion, to exert willpower over natural expressions of joy, anger, sadness, and fear. While there is certainly beauty in learning how to hold our emotions with dignity and moderation, deepening our experience of these bodies will absolutely include allowing ourselves to express the full range of our emotions, to feel what we feel as we feel it, composting the rigid ideas of civilized behavior that remove us from the wisdom our bodies have to offer. In the same way children can shift their movement according to these imagined moods, we can also find the sensation of our embodied emotions through imagination. That's a fancy way of saying it. Here's a simpler way. Our memories live in the body. This means our imagined futures can as well. So here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to invite you or we're going to invite you, we're doing this together, to think of a memory that brings to life a sense of playfulness, safety, curiosity, enjoyment. A way in that I find often helpful is to think of a favorite food because favorite foods typically carry a memory along with them. In the book, I share about a favorite food that I have, which is in my family, we call it Grandpa's rice. It's rice cooked with tomatoes, onion, and garlic, simple stuff, definitely not in any fancy cookbook. But it's not only the taste of that food, it's also the particular smell of wood smoke and spring air that seemed to always follow my grandfather, no matter what the season. It's the color of his house jacket that was this muddy pond water. It's the feeling that I had. He died when I was little, so it's the feeling I had of sitting on his lap and having this warmth at my back. So that food, that favorite food, brings to life a whole memory. Another favorite food, fresh picked watermelon, it doesn't just bring to mind the sweetness of the watermelon. There's also the summer day, the heat of the sun, the way that I'm finding some cool relief of shade, that satisfying crack of the skin of the watermelon that only happens if you get a really good one. So I find that favorite food, can be a gateway in, but that's not true for everyone. Sometimes food's not the way in for whatever reason. So, what is a memory that comes to mind when you let yourself explore through the catalog of emotions? Or I like to think of it almost like an apothecary of memory. You know, you go to your tea shelf and you figure out what you want, what tea blend you want to make. Go to your memory shelf and see what sort of memory you want to pull up. A memory that invokes a sense of safety, belonging, playfulness, joy. You might find something that fits all of those or just one. Let that come to mind. And then the time that we'll give to writing about it, let that memory come to life, expand it, feel the colors, the temperatures, the setting of it, and then live into those sensations as physical experiences. So if the watermelon is the one that you're choosing, that would include heat, right? And the sweetness down the tongue and the coolness through the belly as you take in the watermelon. Let the memory come to life in sensory language, and we'll give ourselves 7 minutes to do that. Do you want to add anything, Catherine, before we start that?
One thing that you might try that might make it really come alive for you is to try writing it in the present tense as if it is happening right now as you're imagining it. So, um, using the present tense, and you might even think of it as a scene in a time and place. Abigail mentioned the heat. What are you feeling around you? What are the sensations within you? And yeah, writing it in the present tense can also, Abigail was, as we were talking about this, she bridged it very beautifully in my head from this idea of how we heal. What was it that you said, Abigail? I feel like you can say it. It's leaving my head, but will you say
I think so. We can go back to our catalog of notes.
it?
Essentially, in going back to a memory like that one of my grandfather and letting my body feel that sense of safety and belonging and finding that for me, through exploring that memory, that scene of sitting on my grandfather's lap, the smell of wood smoke and spring air realizing that for me in my body, a sense of safety and belonging is almost always accompanied by at least a subtle leaning back into my chair, into myself. That is a sign from my body that I feel safe with the people I'm with. And if I've leaned away, that's another sign, right? So my past is giving me information in the present. But then because I have taken the past and brought it into the present, I'm living that memory right now, even though it's now almost 40 years since it happened. That means that an embodied future lives in my body as well. So I can, a woman in my ongoing somatic program who is no longer a member but was there for a form the right when the quarantine started, Mariella Rose. We were exploring these ideas of like, what kind of future do we belong to? And she shared this guidepost statement that I've held on to since 2020 that we belong to the future that we long for. I belong to that future and I belong to it through these embodied sensations that live in me that I can access through memory. So I belong to a future of belonging where we feel that safety, that sense of comfort that comes that we can access your particular magical description of it might be different than mine, but I think we can go back. Hopefully, we can go back, at least picking and parceling out different moments to come up with a description that lets us know that when we're feeling safe, held, satisfied, joyful, whatever constellation of descriptions, by going back into my memory to find it, I now have a map to what I want to feel in the future. And so I can move from past through present into future. So I think that's what I said ish.
Wonder I couldn't. No wonder I couldn't say it. You said it so beautifully.
So we're doing that. And I'm looking at the time, and unfortunately, we thought that we were going to have like, so much time with 90 minutes, and it's already now getting too close to the wrap up of our time. So quick, just like kind of, facilitator, like huddle up. What do you want to do with our last 12 minutes now that we're seeing that we only have 12 minutes? Do we do this 7 minutes or do you want
I think
to?
we do. I think it would be good to do just maybe like 3 minutes dipping into it, and then we'll come out and open up for questions.
Sounds good. Yeah, cool. So but the 7 minute is coming from Catherine. And it's funny, Catherine, I didn't tell you this, but when we were talking about how long it should be, the number seven flashed in my head. And I was like, no, no, 10. And then you explained why 7 minutes as a writing number is so helpful, that it has this kind of magical amount of enoughness, but not too muchness. So you
Mhm.
can maybe take this with you, and even just after this call tonight, or maybe tomorrow morning, write for 7 minutes about what a sense of belonging really is in your own body, how you find it through memory, so that you can then weave it into the future. But yeah, let's do 3 minutes. I'll set the timer. Do 3 minutes of writing the scene in your own body. It doesn't have to be specific to a memory if that's too difficult to find, but how do you know in your own body that you are in a space of safety, belonging, love, care? How does your body tell you that that's where you are? Let's take 3 minutes to write about that. Take a few seconds to wrap up. Okay. All right. I hope that was generative for you. One thing that I hope you can take with you into how you write about this and consider about this in the future is it doesn't have to make sense. It's the beauty of poetry that sometimes, or just poetic writing, sometimes the most evocative expression of a sensation is not logical, but just allowing these images to come forth and letting it be its own sort of discovery process. It is a way that we uh, rehydrate these connections between mind and body, right? The mind thinks, the mind makes language, the body speaks in sensation, sound, color, memory. And so this is how we sort of bridge that gap that can be severed where the mind says, no, no, it has to be pretty and neat and the first draft has to be perfect. All of that has to get kind of lovingly set aside so that the body can come forward and say, no, it's secure. Like this feels like fuzzy velvet. This feels like I'm an eggshell. This feels like, images that don't have to make sense. You want to share anything, Catherine?
I don't think I have anything to add there. I think that took me somewhere unexpected. The
Hmm.
writing, and I wish we had the space to really be in dialogue with people to hear where that took them, because I got an insight about something totally unrelated just from the way I wrote a particular statement there about comfort.
Hmm. And we have talked, Catherine and I have talked about how maybe this is the start of something longer, like some sort of other thing. So now that you're connected to us, stay connected to us. Because I have a feeling that we're going to want to do that. Because, yeah, and even just looking at these questions
I know.
that are in the chat, I'm like, no, no, we have 6 minutes.
I know.
Um, and these are really great questions. So, gosh. So, this first one of how to craft an embodiment practice and how do you know it will work for you? Um, the beauty of that is that there's no, I, it's just finding because it's cyclical, because it's a living and, um, adaptable experience that we're holding ourselves through waves. I don't think there's any one way to do it, right? One of my teachers, my primary somatic teacher, always says that once you start, you won't stop, right? Even if, you don't do the practices. Once you open up that avenue of conversation, especially if the curiosity is there, it will continue in some form or another, and it will take different shape. Um, it will take different shape as go through the seasons of your life. Um, like I said, I don't have children. Catherine, you do. So your embodiment practice is going to look different when you have young children than when your children are older or before you had children. That just kind of goes without saying. But even just, day to day, month to month, it's a living thing. I will say that inviting play into it rather than the sort of workhorse mentality, I have to do this. This is another thing I have to check off my box, but instead inviting play into it and then just simply asking the body, like we did at the very beginning, what does comfort feel like? Might I feel more comfortable? What do we need? What do we want? What do we need? Is an embodiment practice. It can be that simple. What do we want? What do we need? Can open up that avenue for the body to speak. And it could be, a movement practice. It could be a writing practice. It could be lying in the bed for, as long as life allows. There's really, if you think of like a Venn diagram, one circle would say almost anything can be healing, and the other circle would say anything can be a distraction. So it's not to say that there's a category of like, okay, binge watching your favorite show on Netflix lives in the disembodiment side, and meditation lives in the embodiment side. Because I've been teaching meditation and yoga for almost 2 decades, and I've definitely seen and experienced myself use meditation as an escape route rather than an embodiment practice. It just happens. Sometimes you can do it. But Netflix binging, my favorite show, can be an embodiment practice if it's through a conversation with my own body. So, not to say that I don't like, not to be too open-ended of an answer, but it really is a conversation rather than a sort of dictated, you do this and then this, right? Do you have a response to that?
Sure. I agree about it being a conversation with your body and what you said about playfulness as well. And I think for me, before I even had a sense of like going years back, g moving from like the sense of exercise, like I need to exercise, versus and then into like how much of that into just the language of embodiment practice, which wasn't a part of my language years ago. Um, and you reference early motherhood as well. For me, an embodiment practice then was very simple, even though I wouldn't have described it as this, but you said, what do I need? Noticing, I am thirsty. I'm thirsty. Okay, I'm going to get water right now with no delay before I do anything for anyone else. That was an embodiment practice as much as I could. You know, sometimes kids are hanging on your legs, little sweeties, but what am I you might notice temperatures like, oh, I'm feeling warm right now. What would make me more comfortable? Or my feet are cold. Okay, I'm going to put on socks. I think once you start to notice and heed and respond to those small messages from the body of comfort, then you build that trust for the intuition leading you toward more in-depth, perhaps, embodiment practices. Um, but it can start with something very simple that doesn't even need to be planned or scheduled or worked in necessarily. It just starts with noticing, tuning into the body, and then responding and building that trust with your body that you will respond to its needs. And tying in, I saw there's another question about pleasure, and part of what I was thinking kind of ties into that as well. Added to the list of questions of is there any way I could make this more comfortable, even by 5 degrees? I like to ask myself, is there any way I could make this more pleasurable? Whatever I'm doing right now, is there something that could make it more pleasurable? Like, oh, I have to sit at my desk to answer some emails right now. Oh, well, I maybe I can open a window to hear the sounds outside, and that will make it more pleasurable. Or even maybe I don't have to sit at my desk at all. Maybe I could go sit outside and do this work. Or if I have a little more time, maybe I'll go and do one of my favorite things, which is to go sit by the water and do my work and write and enter a totally different dream space there. So where's the curiosity? What's it leading you toward? And
Mm,
one last note there, I found that actually saying to myself, in this time we were talking about rediscovering yourself through whatever kind of rupture has happened or big life transition or big change with your body or changes in identity, such as like I'm thinking of the start of motherhood for me. Whenever you're in a state where you are big changes happened and you don't even know how to relate to yourself anymore necessarily of what you need or what you like. I found myself one day just taking a walk and kicking a pine cone down the street. Just like I would kick it, then I would walk up to it and I would kick it once I got to it, let it, then walk up to it again and kick it. And that felt very playful in a way I hadn't planned. And I just found myself saying aloud, I like this. I
mm,
like this. This feels good. This is fun. And I still do that. When I like something, when I'm by myself, and I'm kind of surprised by enjoyment in a moment, I will actually say that to myself. I like this. This feels good. This is fun. And it really lands in me at a different level than just passing through it. And then it creates this kind of breadcrumb. We used that word earlier, where when I'm looking back and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, things have been really hard, or I'm just kind of coasting, what's going on? Sometimes I'll try to recall those moments of pleasure and enjoyment, and those little breadcrumbs of when I said I like this have been left behind me in recent days, and I remember them more easily.
Hmm. Hmm. I think to take a note too from what you said about when you were showing how, in that beautiful response to how the question held the answer, I'm looking at this question a little bit more deeply. And again, I wish we could go into all of these beautiful questions, but the idea of how do you craft an embodiment practice, it's the word, using the word craft was a stroke of brilliance because it's a craft. And a craft is practiced, right? The master doesn't just arrive knowing how to, like knowing how to work their art so completely. There's a practice involved and there's a humility that's necessary. As for how do we know it will work for how do you know it will work for you? You don't. You just until you ask the body and try some things. There's a tension there because in order to really go under the surface, you have to be willing to try one thing long enough to get past a layer of resistance that might show up. And I think that in my personal experience, there's a sort of draw, even through the resistance, when it's something that's actually working and there's no right answer to what that'll be because you're crafting it and it will shift and it will change as you shift and change. So it's a practice and it's a craft. I think I think we need to these questions are so good. I'm going to take these questions and use them as inspiration for my own writing on my Substack, Bones Made of Stardust, that's free to follow. Maybe, Catherine, you're going to be inspired to answer some of these questions as well, because I want to, I want to be able to explore them. But thank you all for being here, for giving us this, for giving this conversation your time and attention. Thank you to the crew at North Atlantic Books for making this night possible and also for making our book babies possible. Um, really, when people ask what it's like to write for North Atlantic, I'm just like, oh, where do you want to start? Because I have lots of amazing things to say. And one of them is that you end up becoming part of this cohort of incredible thinkers and writers. So thank you, Catherine. This is really so sweet. This has been so special.
Thank you, Abigail. And I'll echo Abigail's thanks to North Atlantic Books for hosting us and for bringing us together. And thank you to each and every one of you for your presence and your engagement and the ways that you may invite this conversation, this dialogue to ripple out in the days ahead, in conversations with people you encounter, or even like message. Feel free to message me and continue the conversation. I'd love to hear from you, and um, really grateful for this time together.
Yeah, yeah. I echo that. My website is my name, so easy to find. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.